Hey guys, my name is Rob, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different with a kind of follow-up or check-in on the GameSir Tarantula Pro. I've been using this gamepad a ton over the past couple of weeks, and I've got a couple of great things to report, as well as some less great things. We're also going to briefly talk about the Xbox Elite Series 2 controller, kind of in relation to one of the good things about the Tarantula Pro, and you'll see what I mean. Firstly, we are able to upgrade the software for the Tarantula Pro and customize the gamepad through the GameSir Connect app. Chinese is currently still the only language option in the app, but we can work around that. I essentially just uploaded screenshots of the various pages of the Connect app to Google Translate and downloaded the translated images so that I could kind of show you guys what's going on here. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, there's a link that says unable to connect, and this link takes you to an online guide where I was able to download driver updates for the Tarantula gamepad and the USB dongle. This product help page is also in Chinese, but translating mostly works so we can navigate the page pretty easily. The T3 Pro is referred to as the nine-tailed fox here, which is the original name I heard for this controller earlier this year. As you can see on the left, there are links for various tutorials, but what we're looking for specifically is the firmware upgrade tutorial. This lists two firmware packages for the gamepad, so we're going to download the newer one. I did also download the only firmware package listed for the receiver as well, but unfortunately that was the firmware my receiver was already on. They do have an instruction video here for how to put the controller into update mode, but once you extract and open the package, the update window prompts you to do it as well, so you don't really need the video tutorial. Once you've updated the gamepad, the connection app still looks the same, but now you can actually select the T3 Pro and it takes you into the customization page. Once we translate this, we have a lot of the same settings that we saw in the mobile app, which we went over in my initial Tarantula Pro review. In the top left is RGB settings, below that is trigger settings, in the middle we have joystick settings, bottom right is button assignment, and then in the top right, which says coming soon, is the gyro settings. You can adjust a lot of the settings from this main page, including some of the RGB lighting, trigger settings, thumbstick dead zones, and button assignments, but you can also click on the top of any of these boxes to go into more detail for that section. The RGB section has two tabs. The first one is for the LED light strip, and you can change the pattern, color, brightness, and speed. And then the second tab is button lighting, and you do set these separately for Xbox and Switch button layouts. In the trigger section, you can set dead zones independently for each trigger, and you can adjust the trigger curves, and you can customize those curves, but if you have trigger locks on, these are instant triggers regardless, because these are mechanical trigger locks. You can also set hair triggers when using them in analog mode as well, but I'm not really sure why you would do that versus using the mechanical locks. For thumbsticks, you can set the dead zones, adjust the response curve, and you can change the circularity algorithm between circular and rectangular, so essentially the same thing as enabling raw data mode in the GameSir Nexus app, but then you can also set the anti-dead zone. This basically sets the minimum or maximum input that can be registered, so if you lower the max, then full input will only register up to the limit you set, and if you increase the min, then as soon as the stick leaves the neutral position, it's at that minimum value. Then at the bottom there's an advanced mapping submenu, which is pretty interesting. Here you can set either stick as the left or right thumbstick, so you can swap sticks to play lefty if you want to. You can also set either stick as mouse input, or as the D-pad, or as keyboard inputs, and you can set each direction individually as well as the thumbstick click input. I'm not sure I've ever seen this before. I don't know that I'll use it, but it's still pretty cool that this is the only gamepad that does this. And then finally we have button mapping, which is the highlight of the app customization. You can reassign every button on the Tarantula Pro other than the home button, the turbo button, and the mode button on the back of the controller. That does include the menu and view buttons. More importantly, you can assign them to basically anything. When you select a button to assign, it opens this menu, which shows all the default controller inputs as options. But you can also click on Advanced Settings at the bottom, which pulls up this screen with tabs for gamepad buttons, numeric keypad, keyboard, and mouse. At the bottom of each tab, you can also enable macros and set turbo for any button, as well as adjusting the turbo input rate. I'm relieved that this customization exists because otherwise I'm not sure what the point of all the C and T buttons would be. By default, C1 and 2 are assigned to view, so all three of the buttons to the left of the turbo are view, and likewise all three of the buttons to the right of the turbo button are assigned to menu. They don't say that when you go into button mapping, but that's what they do. Likewise, the T1, 2, and 3 buttons also don't say they're assigned to anything, but they screenshot out of the box. I haven't reassigned all these buttons because I still don't find them to be super useful based on where they're located on the controller, but I have been playing around with some things. The layout of this controller reminded me a lot of the SCUF Vision Pro, which has a row of additional face buttons on the bottom of the controller, and essentially I ended up using those buttons for volume controls and Windows shortcuts. I'm doing a little bit of that with the Tarantula Pro as well. I have Z set as push to talk, so I assign that to a C button, and I set a macro on one of the T buttons to full mute in Discord. I play a lot of Warzone with a bunch of other old men who are all loud and annoying just like me, so being able to quickly shut them up is more important than you might think. At one point, our group chat was literally named, "Shut the up, I'm in the gulag." The main benefit of being able to assign these inputs to any of the face buttons, including the ABXY buttons, is that it partially compensates for the lack of four rear buttons. It doesn't fix it, but it makes it more tolerable. For instance, since I have A and B assigned to the rear buttons on the T3, I reassigned those two face buttons to keyboard inputs for R and G. Again, I mostly play Warzone, and if you don't know, assigning keyboard inputs for reloading and plating splits those actions, which are typically combined with another action, to one face button on controller input, so you're not picking up a random gun off the ground when you're trying to reload, because all the B button does now is reload, and if you have tap to interact on, X will only interact unless you're holding it down. As usual, my apologies to all the non-Call of Duty players. The point is that being able to assign keyboard inputs on a gamepad is a really useful feature, and it's a big advantage to playing on PC if you're using something like the T3 Pro, the Vader 4 Pro, or the SCUF Instinct Pro. It's something that you can't do on Xbox, unless you're using an Elite Series 2 controller. So this is the first Pro controller I ever truly fell in love with. I had a number of SCUF controllers before this, as well as an Elite Series 1, but the Series 2 was a different animal. It has adjustable thumbstick tension, three-way trigger stops that do support hair trigger mode, four rear buttons, replaceable thumbstick caps, and on top of that, to this day, it's the most comfortable controller I've ever used. This only applies to the full-fledged Series 2, by the way. The Series 2 core controller uses different materials and in general feels cheaper and way worse. Also, the SCUF replacement paddles for the Elite controllers are the best product SCUF has ever made, which is a really low bar, but I appreciate them nonetheless. Recently, though, the Elite 2 kind of got an upgrade. To my understanding, Microsoft updated the Xbox Accessories app with features that were designed specifically for their adaptive joystick, which was unveiled a few weeks ago, but the updated mapping options for that accessory also apply to the Elite Series 2, which means you can now map keyboard inputs to the gamepad, and not just the rear buttons, but virtually every input on the controller, similar to the T3 Pro. The difference, though, is that you can use these settings when playing on Xbox, and to my knowledge, the Elite 2 is literally the only controller that can do this. This doesn't apply to the standard Xbox controllers or even the Elite 1 for some reason. Does this mean you should use an Elite 2 when playing on Xbox? It still wouldn't be my first choice, mainly due to the polling rate, which is capped at 125 Hz, and they're also notorious for problems, most notably stick drift issues, which I've had either out of the box or within a few months with every Elite controller I've owned. But the keyboard mapping is not nothing, and there are a lot of people who still prefer this controller to anything else. I get comments about it all the time in my reviews of other controllers, so I just wanted to point this out. If you already own a Series 2 or are determined to get one regardless, try out the keyboard mapping, or at least look into the game you play to see how it might give you an advantage. So the big update for the Tarantula Pro is that the app customization does work, and specifically button mapping is much more versatile in the GameSir Connect app than it was in the mobile app. This has made a big difference for me in terms of how much I actually enjoy using the controller. The other big thing is that the more time I spend in game, the more impressed I am by the TMR joysticks. I do think these are a significant upgrade over the prior GameSir Hall Effect modules in terms of accuracy, so I'm really looking forward to trying these out on the Cyclone 2, which I hope to have in hand as early as next week. Since it's also listed in the Connect app, I'm working under the assumption that we'll be able to utilize the same button mapping options, or at least I'm hoping so. The bad news for the Tarantula Pro is that other than the button mapping, my main complaints with the gamepad still stand, including the wireless polling rate. As I said, there is currently no driver update for the T3 dongle, and right now it's still registering a bit over 125 Hz. I know this result shows max polling rate of 250, but the average is still well closer to 125. You also can't connect to the app via wireless, so nothing to adjust in there. So overall thoughts after 2 weeks, for me personally, I can kind of look over the wireless issues for my own uses because I typically don't play wireless anyway, and although I don't love it, I can live with the membrane face buttons. This gamepad did address my number one complaint about prior GameSir controllers by adding mechanical trigger stops, but my number two complaint has always been the two rear button layout, which is still there. And although the extra keyboard mapping does help with that a little bit, it's still extra disappointing with this gamepad because they would be way more useful on this controller with the additional functionality of the keyboard mapping. I hope this video helped you out, and if so, please subscribe if you haven't already. Likes are also appreciated, and I do try to react and respond to all comments. I'll be doing more reviews regularly, so I hope to see you back here again soon. Thanks for watching.